In data structures and algorithms, apart from the knowledge of, or apart from the understanding of how to solve a problem, how well you are able to implement it, she or he will make a judgment on me only based on how I communicate. There are some interviewers who expect you to be very communicative. Next, when it comes to problem solving. So, when we say problem solving, people usually associate, for entry level roles, problem solving is data structures or DSA, or some people might even be triggered to say competitive coding. So, problem solving includes DSA, problem solving is not DSA. All right. So there is a very thin line between, thinking that the only thing problem solving is about DSA. That is not true. The most common way for an interviewer to gauge a candidate's knowledge is using data structures and algorithms, especially for entry level roles, especially for standard large scale Fortune 500 companies, or large scale employers like TCS or Infosys. Why is DSA given so much importance? Because irrespective of the tech stack, irrespective of your background, irrespective of whatever you have worked on, irrespective of your experience level, data structures and algorithms is expected to provide a way to gauge how a candidate thinks. कि अगर आपको एरे में कोई एलिमेंट इंसर्ट करके उसको सर्च करने का बोला जाए, then how well you are able to do it. That logic only requires your thinking power. It only requires the interviewer to understand how you think. It does not require you to know a framework beforehand. It does not require you to know Java beforehand. It does not require you to know React beforehand. The only thing that would be required is to be able to gauge how the candidate is thinking. So this is the reason why data structures and algorithms are the most common and standard way of solving of technical interviews. These are usually the first stage of interviews for almost all companies. In data structures and algorithms, apart from the knowledge of, or apart from the understanding of how to solve a problem, how well you are able to implement it. हो सकता है कि आप समझा पाओ, हो सकता है कि you are able to figure out how to solve a problem, but are you able to write the code for it? कंपनी में जाके भविष्यवाणी करने के आपको पैसे नहीं मिलने वाले. You're not gonna get paid to sit and think. If you are not able to convert your thoughts, and if you're not able to convert your logic into code, then you're no good as a developer. So that means that after being able to think through a solution, how well you are able to implement it. The standard languages that are used for DSA include C++ and Java. Time and space complexities, because remember, this is about problem solving, it is about optimizing, about making things better than they are. So the knowledge of time and space complexities is extremely critical when you're solving data structures and algorithms problems, is to how you can make an algorithm more efficient, how you can make sure that Google search runs a lot faster than it normally would. Some of the most standard common topics that are asked by Fortune 500 companies include DP, that stands for dynamic programming, graphs, trees, stacks, queues, and so on. The other aspect that is not that popularly known among entry level folks is this machine coding. HLD, LLD stands for high level or low level design, and system design. So these are asked usually for some semi experienced roles. So if you have little over 1.5 to 2 years of experience, this is something that is usually asked in interviewers. For fresh graduates or for fresh interns, this is not a major topic. So what system design entails is how you are able to construct an entire system from scratch. That will again involve you to think through a lot of trade-offs. So for instance, if you were told कि भाई Facebook बना दो, if you are able to think of all the requirements that Facebook has, if you have to think of all the challenges, all the constraints that Facebook has, how well are you able to come up with a solution that is similar to the architecture that Facebook uses? So that is involved in the machine coding or the system design round. So again, this is not absolutely critical for entry level roles, but some companies do ask it. For instance, some of the technical I don't think Google or all of those mang companies usually consider system design to be a top priority. For them, DSA is top priority. But for companies that give candidates or give their new entry level freshers such tasks, they require knowledge of system design as well. A few tips for problem solving. Number one, that the idea is to solve a given problem and it is not to mug solutions. So this is the most worrying trend that has been seen so far. Give me one sec. Right. So the idea is to solve a problem and not mug solutions. So the trend that has been seen so far is that there are a list of 300 to 400 problems that are most commonly asked in almost every standard technical DSA interview. The problem with that is that if every candidate goes and mugs those 400 problems, then the interviewers will have no choice but to innovate on those problems, to make those problems even harder. And that means that your mugged up knowledge is not going to come in use. अगर आप 400 प्रॉब्लम्स रट के जाओगे एंड इंटरव्यूअर आगे जाके 400 फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम बना देगा, then it makes absolutely no sense for you to have mugged those solutions to those 400 problems beforehand. Instead of that, if you try to understand the algorithm and the logic behind a problem, then that means that even if वो interviewer होशियार बने, even if he tries to complicate that problem statement or he tries to twist that problem statement, you're still able to grasp that new requirement and you're able to find the solution. ठीक है? अगर आप रट के जाओगे, if you mug up solutions to standard problems, you're going with the hope कि मैंने जो रटा है वही पूछा जाएगा. That is not a given in this industry because every candidate right now knows 400 problems. So that means they might not be able to filter out the best candidates just by that benchmark. That was point number one. Point number two, again, it might feel repetitive at times. When you're practicing data structures and algorithms, you might not get everything at one go. It might get very boring, it might get very repetitive, but mugging up questions is not going to be beneficial in the long run. Remember, you're not interviewing for the next 2 months, you're interviewing for at least the next 7-8 years. So you have to make sure that your fundamentals are clear, not just for the immediate next interview you are giving, but for all the interviews that you will be giving in the future. आपको हर इंटरव्यू के पहले ऑफिस से 2 महीने की छुट्टी लेके अगर रटने बैठना पड़े, then that makes absolutely no sense. So instead of that, if you can make sure that your concepts are very clear right from the onset, then that means that you will save a lot of time of yours when you're interviewing for multiple roles all throughout your career. The next point is communication skills. The first point I mentioned, please focus on that very carefully. The way a candidate communicates is a single pointer to judge a candidate. I might be the most brilliant developer that the interviewer has ever seen, but then the interviewer is seeing me for the first time. She or he will make a judgment on me only based on how I communicate. If I know everything there is to know about Java, but then if I'm not able to convince the interviewer that I am able to know everything about it, then that means that my knowledge does not hold a lot of weight. Interviewers have a job to do. They have to make a decision within that 1.5 hour of interview. So that means that they are not gonna go beyond what you express. वो ऐसा नहीं सोचेंगे कि हाँ भाई इसको बोलना नहीं आता है, but वो अच्छा कर सकता है. That sort of story is limited to Raju Rastogi in Three Idiots, right? In real life, this almost never happens. So that means that what you know, you should be able to communicate it very, very properly, very, very effectively. Of the tips for being good at conversation. Number one is to know your audience. That means that you should know what the interviewer is expecting from you. There are some interviewers who expect you to be very communicative. If they give you a DSA problem, then they expect that you will start communicating about that problem right from the onset. You will tell them every step of your thought process, right from the brute force to the challenges, to the brute force, to the optimizations and everything. In contrast, there are some interviewers who do not want all of that detail. They only want you to come up with the optimized solution and then walk them through that solution. So that means that when you are sitting in front of an interviewer, try to make sure that you try do your best to understand what the interviewer is expecting and try to cater to her or him in the best way possible so that it's good for your interview. English knowledge should be decent. When I say decent, it means that as long as you are able to convey your thoughts properly in English, that should be good. You do not have to have native proficiency in English. That is not something that an interviewer is expecting. All right. So that you should not worry a lot about it. There are a lot of good developers who do not have a very strong command in English, and that has not hampered their careers a bit. Do not fake accents. This is something that I have seen in my personal experience as well. When you try to fake accents, number one, it is irritating to the interviewer को पहली ही बार में पता चल जाएगा कि तुम हो उससे ज्यादा चौड़े बनने की कोशिश कर रहे हो. That is a very wrong narrative that goes out to the interviewer. The interviewer will not be able to entrust honesty onto you कि if this candidate is actually who she or he claims to be or is just faking it just like his or her accent. So make sure that you do not fake accents. Do not try to put on fake American or British accents or anything. Whatever your natural accent is, please just speak in that. Speak slowly and surely. I had that challenge in early on in my career that I used to speak very fast just to make sure that I would blurt everything out before I forgot कि मैं भूल जाऊं उसके पहले मैं सब बोल देता हूं. But the challenge is कि मैं बोल रहा हूं पर interviewer सुन पा रहा है क्या? Is the interviewer able to listen to everything? Is she or he able to absorb everything I'm saying? The interviewer is listening to it for the first time. I have already had it in my brain. So that means that you are answering the interviewer. So you have to think and speak from her or his point of view, not from yours. Make sure that you listen. If the interviewer feels that you are all talking and not listening, that is a very big red flag. Number one. Number two is that if you do not listen to the interviewers, you might miss out a lot of nuances or a lot of hints that the interviewer is giving you. So make sure that you listen before you talk. Finally, clarify any questions that you have without sounding inattentive or rude. So that means that you have to make sure that if there is something that you did not understand, ask it, but make sure that that interviewer को ऐसा नहीं लगना चाहिए कि आप सो रहे थे when she or he was explaining the problem statement. And do not and make sure that you are not being very rude about it, that this is something that you did not explain well, this is something that you did not clarify well. You're not attacking the interviewer, you're only asking for clarification. Finally, interview prep. So how do you go about preparing? So first step is, before you actually start preparing, remember that you have to shortlist your preferred roles. We just discussed the various industry trends that are there, and based on your inclinations, your experience, and your tech stacks, you have to shortlist the roles that you wish to apply for. You cannot use the same resume, you cannot use the same interview preparation for each and every role under the sun. If you prepare for React, you cannot just go and sit blindly in a backend role. If you prepare for cloud, you cannot go and sit inside a DevOps role. That means you first have to choose the roles that you wish to apply for and understand the requirements. You have to convince the interviewer that you are a good fit for the role. So that means that you have to understand what the role requires from you first. Second thing is, check the interview experiences to understand the patterns. So Geeks for Geeks is a very standard and very good tool, a good resource for where you can find interview experiences to almost any company anywhere for any experience level. So please do make sure that you check interview experiences, that for this role, what are all the questions that were asked, how many rounds were there, because there is a standard format for most large companies in which interviews are followed. That means that there is a very high chance that you will get an idea of what to expect before the interview itself. And once you are clarified with what the role expects and what the interview expects, then you can go and make a plan based on what's expected asked in the interviews. For DSA prep, remember that repetition is key. You have to make sure that you are solving each problem. For newcomers especially, this is extremely important for folks about, just give me one sec. Yeah, sorry about that. Ironically, I was getting a call from a possible interviewer. Right. So For DSA prep, please do make sure that you solve problems repeatedly. For beginners, for those of you who are starting out, follow the 137 principle. That means that the same DSA problem, solve it, let's say, on Monday, then solve it on Wednesday, and then solve it on Sunday. The same problem, if you solve it thrice without looking through the solution, that means that you'll be able to understand the logic and keep it in your memory for a very long time. So that's point number one. Point number two, follow the 80-20 principle. Do not focus on problems that are very rarely asked. So, for instance, if you are only focusing on bit manipulation and there is only a 3% probability that bit manipulation is going to be asked, you're only wasting your time if you're not able to come to cover a problem that is as important as Kadani's algorithm, because Kadani's algorithm has a 30% chance of being asked. So make sure that 80-20 principle means that 80% of the efforts only come from 80% of the outcomes only come from 20% of the efforts. So make sure that you maximize the efforts you are putting, work on only the most common, most popular problems asked in that role. And most importantly, make sure that you are very, very consistent. Remember, DSA is a game that is played long term. You cannot become a master of DSA in 10 to 15 days. You can somehow mug up solutions and you think you are good enough at it, but that is usually just a facade. You have to continuously work on DSA for long term, and that will allow you to be consistent. Just give me 1 second here. For system design problems, so for system design, there are usually a few standard problems that are very commonly asked. For instance, the design of a social media platform like Facebook, or the design of Netflix, or the design of Uber Eats, or the design of Ola. So these are a few standard problems that are asked, and the expectation is only a few tweaks around these standard problems. So that means that if you attack the standard problems, you'll be able to understand the concepts very clearly, and you'll be able to, there is a very high likelihood that what you asked is something that you have already studied. So first, make sure that you focus on the standard problems. You understand the concept. So load balancing, about what vertical versus horizontal scaling, about requests, about networks, about databases, what databases, whether to use an SQL or a NoSQL database. So these are a few standard concepts that come associated with system design. Please do make sure that your concepts are very clear. And finally, analytical thinking, because the challenges, the problems that are going to be asked in a system design round are the standard problem that I just told you, that during the streaming of the FIFA match, GeoTV had goofed up. That means that a lot of users were facing a lot of glitches, a lot of buffering when FIFA was playing, when the FIFA match was being played. So in that case, how would you solve it? This would require you to have an analytical thinking. Such problems do not have standard rate solutions. In these cases, you have to make sure that you are able to think outside the box. You are able to analyze the problem and provide a solution. For skill-based roles, the first important thing is to have tech stack fundamentals. And when I say fundamentals, I do not mean definitions. You should actually be able to implement things. For instance, if you are learning React, then just the knowledge, just the definition of what a component is, or what a state or a prop is not going to be enough. What you need to do is to actually understand how a component is implemented. What you'd actually need to do is to understand how state works, actually have written it in code, because that is the skill that the interviewer will be testing. Secondly, project based learning. This is honestly the best learning technique that I've had for any particular sort of tech stack. So for instance, if you want to learn React, first learn the basic concepts of React, only the essentials that you need to know to get started writing React code. Then implement something, make a to-do list application, make a calendar application. It will obviously fail on the first go. You will find every error under the sun, and that is exactly what you need. That पहले कुछ भी नहीं चलना चाहिए. But once you realize कि कुछ नहीं चल रहा है, then try to fix those errors one by one. कि if the date is not loading, how do I make sure that the date loads? If the checkbox is not clicking, how do I make sure that the checkbox clicks? And whatever you need to learn to fix that error, learn that. So for instance, if you have to learn state to fix that checkbox issue, you learn state. If you have to learn props to fix that calendar issue, then learn that. So in this way, to solve a problem, you will actually gain hands-on skills on debugging, which is the absolutely most critical skill to have for a software engineering role. So fix it, learn the concepts that are needed to fix it, and then repeat this process. So build something, it will break, learn what you need to do to fix it, it will work, and then repeat this process. This is the best possible way in which you can learn about a particular tech stack. These are a few references that are provided. So levels.fyi is a website that is usually prevalent in the US. I think there is a similar site for India as well, which provides the various categories of the various levels of roles that are there and the standard expected salaries across each of those roles. Remote.com provides remote jobs. Glassdoor provides a variety of different roles and the expected salaries in those roles and the reviews of employees who have worked in those roles. And Geeks for Geeks, as you all know, is a standard interview preparation portal. I will be sharing the link to the feedback form here. So please do make sure that you leave your feedback for this session and let us know, me and the Career Ninja team know how you did it, how you found the session. So I have one question here. So can you share how you worked on your communication? So first, the most important and the easiest thing is that I analyze myself critically. Like I told you, that initially I used to speak very, very fast. And that means that before the interviewer had time to absorb what I'm saying, I was already on to the next statement. So after the interview, I came back and realized why I flunked that interview. And eventually, with a whole lot of practice, I got to realize that I have to make sure that I understand the interviewer first and not myself. A lot of times the mistake we make is that we go with the assumption that the other person is thinking exactly what we are thinking. That is not exactly how it works in real life. Instead, we have to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, that am I catering to what that person is expecting or not? All right. And so those of you who fill the form, you will be getting the certificate for attending this webinar in the coming week. So please do make sure that you fill this form just to get that Cool C certificate. I have another question. How do you negotiate with salary at base level? So again, it role for smaller companies and startups, there is usually an open option for negotiation based on skills. If you go for larger companies like TCS or Infosys or Google or any of those companies, they usually have very standard, very common bars, and it is usually very hard, rather impossible to negotiate at the base level since you do not have a lot of experience and you usually do not have a lot of competing offers. ठीक है? All right, guys. If there are any more questions, I'm on the chat for the next few minutes. Until then, I will hand over to the Career Ninja team. Thank you for your time.